It was one of those ordinary afternoons when Judge Judy's courtroom was buzzing with the usual mixture of tension, curiosity, and drama. The audience had already settled into their seats, waiting for another case that promised heated arguments, clever retorts, and, of course, Judge Judy's sharp tongue. But nobody in that room had any idea that this particular case would turn into one of the most unforgettable moments in the show's history. When the bailiff called the next case, a woman named Karen strutted confidently into the courtroom. From the first glance, she carried herself like someone who believed she could talk her way out of anything. Her outfit was carefully chosen, her hair was perfectly styled, and she wore a faint smirk that suggested she thought she was already in control. The cameras followed her every move as she stood before the bench, arms crossed, waiting for the judge to begin. Opposite her stood the plaintiff, a tired-looking woman who seemed nervous but determined. She clutched a few papers in her hands, glancing occasionally at Karen as if she had been dealing with her for far too long. The bailiff handed Judge Judy the case file, and the judge's sharp eyes scanned the first few lines before she looked up. "All right," Judge Judy said, her voice calm but commanding. "We have a case involving property damage and false representation. Let's hear it." The plaintiff began explaining how Karen had rented a room from her and caused chaos, noise complaints, unpaid rent, and an incident that ended with broken furniture. Karen rolled her eyes dramatically as if the whole story was ridiculous. When it was her turn to speak, she flipped her hair and said, "Your Honor, none of that is true. She's exaggerating everything. I'm the victim here." Judge Judy leaned forward slightly. "You're the victim," she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "That's an interesting take. Let's see if the evidence agrees with you." Karen smiled sweetly, as if trying to charm her way through. She had watched enough episodes of Judge Judy to know that the judge didn't like excuses, but she believed she could handle it. What she didn't expect, however, was that this time, her past would catch up to her on national television. As the questioning went on, Judge Judy noticed a few inconsistencies. Karen's answers didn't line up with the documents presented by the plaintiff. The rent receipts didn't match, and her story about the damage changed several times. At one point, Judge Judy looked directly at her and said, "You know, I can tell when someone's lying. And right now, you're not doing a very good job." The courtroom audience chuckled lightly, but Karen's smile faltered for the first time. She tried to recover, saying, "Your Honor, I have nothing to hide. I'm an honest person. I've never been in trouble in my life." That statement would be the turning point. Judge Judy's sharp eyes narrowed slightly. "Never been in trouble," she repeated. "Not even a little brush with the law?" Karen hesitated for half a second before replying. "No, never." It was a small pause, but for Judge Judy, that pause spoke volumes. The judge turned to her assistant, who had been quietly organizing paperwork off camera. "Run her name through the system," Judy said calmly. The courtroom fell silent. Everyone could feel the tension rise. Karen's expression froze, her lips tightening as if she suddenly realized what was about to happen. The assistant returned a few moments later with a folder. She handed it to Judge Judy, who opened it, glanced through it quickly, and then looked up with that unmistakable mix of disbelief and authority that only she could deliver. "Well," she said slowly, "it seems that the truth always finds its way to the surface." Karen shifted uncomfortably. "What does that mean?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. Judge Judy held up a document. "According to this," she said, "you were arrested 2 years ago for disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Does that sound familiar?" The audience gasped. Karen's face went pale. That was a misunderstanding," she stammered. "It wasn't even a real arrest. They dropped it." Judge Judy tilted her head. "You just told me you've never been in trouble before. Yet here I have a record that says otherwise. And you know what else is interesting?" Karen's breathing grew shallow. "What?" Judge Judy held up another sheet of paper, this one with a photo attached. "There's also a mugshot," she said calmly. The room went completely silent. Karen's eyes widened. "Your Honor, Please, that's not relevant to this case, she pleaded, her voice trembling now. Oh, I think it is, Judge Judy replied. You told me you were an honest person, and you just lied to me, on camera, in front of millions of people. That speaks volumes about your credibility. Karen tried to protest, her words tumbling over each other. I was embarrassed about that. It wasn't my fault. Someone called the police on me unfairly. I didn't want it to come up because it has nothing to do with this. Judge Judy didn't budge. When you come into my courtroom and swear to tell the truth, you tell the truth, she said sternly. You don't get to decide what parts of your past you hide just because it's inconvenient. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. The cameras zoomed in on Karen's face, a mixture of shock, fear, and humiliation. Everyone in the audience sat frozen, watching as Judge Judy turned the tables completely. Karen's voice grew smaller. I didn't mean to lie, Your Honor, she said, looking down. I just didn't think it mattered. It always matters, Judge Judy replied. If you lie about something small, you'll lie about something big. And when credibility is the only thing keeping your story standing, one lie can knock it all down. The plaintiff stood silently, her expression almost unreadable, a mix of relief and quiet satisfaction. She had suspected all along that Karen wasn't as innocent as she pretended to be. Now, the truth had been laid bare for everyone to see. Karen tried one last attempt to salvage her dignity. Your Honor, can we please not show that? I don't want my face on national TV like that. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair. You made the choice to come here, she said evenly. You made the choice to lie under oath. Actions have consequences. If you didn't want your mugshot to be seen, you shouldn't have created one. The audience gasped again, this time with a murmur of admiration for the judge's unflinching honesty. The camera briefly cut to the bailiff, who looked like he was trying not to smile. For Karen, there was no way out. The truth she had tried so desperately to bury was now on display for millions of viewers. Her confidence had evaporated, replaced by quiet shame. She stood there, frozen, as Judge Judy summarized the facts of the case, each word like a hammer striking down the last fragments of her defense. And that was just the beginning of what would become one of the most talked about moments in courtroom television. The tension in the courtroom could have silenced the storm. Karen stood there, frozen in disbelief as the weight of her lie settled in. The air seemed heavy, and even the audience members, normally quick to whisper or react, sat in stunned quiet. Judge Judy, meanwhile, remained composed and deliberate, the embodiment of control and justice. Karen shifted her stance, her confident posture from earlier now completely gone. Her arms, once crossed in defiance, hung limply at her sides. She looked toward the judge with pleading eyes, her voice shaking as she tried to reclaim some sense of control. Your Honor, I swear, it was just a mistake. I didn't want people to judge me for something that wasn't my fault. Judge Judy didn't flinch. You know, she said, her voice steady but sharp, the best way to avoid being judged is to tell the truth from the start. Lying never ends well, especially in my courtroom. Karen's lip quivered as she tried to find the right words. I was scared, she said finally. I didn't think it mattered. Everything matters when you're under oath, Judge Judy replied. If you're dishonest about your past, you'll likely be dishonest about the present. And when I can't trust your words, I can't rule in your favor. Karen looked down, staring at the floor as if it could swallow her whole. The plaintiff, standing just a few feet away, kept her composure, but inside she could barely contain the sense of vindication. For months, she had tried to warn others about Karen's behavior, how she had manipulated people, refused to pay what she owed, and then painted herself as the victim. But now, finally, in front of millions of viewers, the truth was undeniable. Judge Judy turned back to the plaintiff. Ma'am, she said, you've been patient through all of this. Let's go back to the property damage claim. You said she broke a table and left without paying for it. The plaintiff nodded. Yes, Your Honor. She broke the table during one of her loud arguments with the neighbors. When I asked her to pay for it, she refused. Then she left the apartment in terrible condition, holes in the wall, trash everywhere. Karen quickly lifted her head. That's not true. The apartment was already old. I shouldn't be blamed for wear and tear. Judge Judy cut her off instantly. Don't interrupt me. You'll get your turn. Karen bit her lip and stepped back, realizing she had no leverage left. Every time she spoke now, the audience seemed less sympathetic. Her earlier arrogance had turned into something almost pitiful. Judge Judy continued. You signed a lease that made you responsible for any damages beyond normal wear and tear, correct? Yes, Karen mumbled. So when the table broke, who do you think was responsible for replacing it? Karen hesitated. I guess me. You guess? Judge Judy's tone turned razor sharp. This isn't a guessing game. You are responsible. And considering your credibility, or lack thereof, it's hard for me to believe that the plaintiff fabricated any of this. Karen's face flushed red. She tried one last attempt at sympathy. Your Honor, I've been through a lot. People always assume the worst about me. That's why I didn't want that mugshot shown. It's humiliating. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly, her eyes unyielding. Then perhaps it's time to learn that humility isn't the same as hiding the truth. When you try to bury your mistakes, they don't disappear. They just wait for the right moment to resurface, and usually when it hurts the most. The courtroom was utterly silent except for the faint hum of the cameras. Even the bailiff, who had seen countless dramatic cases, looked particularly attentive. Judge Judy continued, her tone firm but calm. I've been doing this for a long time. I've seen people make mistakes, own up to them, and move on. Those people I can respect. But what I can't tolerate is dishonesty, especially when it's deliberate. Karen's eyes filled with tears. She tried to blink them away, but one slipped down her cheek. I didn't mean to lie, she whispered. I just wanted a fair chance. You had a fair chance the moment you walked into this courtroom, Judge Judy replied. You lost it when you decided to lie to me. A murmur rippled through the audience. They could sense that the case was nearing its conclusion, but nobody could look away. This wasn't just another small claims dispute, it had become a lesson about honesty, accountability, and pride. Judge Judy looked over the documents one more time before giving her final thoughts. The evidence supports the plaintiff's claims, she said. Karen, you are responsible for the damages, as well as the unpaid rent. I'm awarding the plaintiff the full amount requested. Karen's mouth fell open slightly. Your Honor. Don't even start, Judge Judy interrupted. You've had your say, and you've wasted enough of this court's time. The final blow came with a line that would later be quoted across social media, news clips, and reaction videos everywhere. Judge Judy looked directly at Karen and said, You wanted to hide your mugshot. But maybe instead of hiding it, you should remember what it cost you, and how many people just saw it. Karen stood frozen, her face pale, her confidence shattered. The cameras captured every second of it, the disbelief, the embarrassment, the realization that her secret was no longer hers to hide. As the bailiff called the next case, Karen turned to leave, her head lowered. The audience watched her go, some shaking their heads, others whispering to each other. The plaintiff, still standing by the podium, gave a quiet sigh of relief. Once Karen was out of the room, Judge Judy looked toward the next case file, but before she moved on, she said something quietly, almost as if speaking to the audience more than anyone else. People forget that the truth has a way of coming out. You can lie for a while, but eventually, it finds you. The show went on, but that moment stayed with everyone who witnessed it. Viewers at home later flooded the internet with comments, reactions, and memes. Clips of the exchange spread across social media, and soon, Karen's mugshot moment became one of the most viral Judge Judy episodes ever aired. In online discussions, people debated whether the judge had gone too far or whether Karen had deserved what she got. But most agreed on one thing: Judge Judy had once again reminded the world that honesty matters, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. For Karen, however, the aftermath was much harder to face. Overnight, she became the subject of online jokes, her mugshot circulating everywhere. The very image she had tried to bury now appeared on news pages, social feeds, and countless videos. She deleted her social media accounts, hoping the storm would pass, but the internet never forgets. Meanwhile, the plaintiff finally got the compensation she had been waiting for. More than the money, though, she felt a sense of closure. For her, it wasn't about revenge, it was about finally being heard, about having the truth recognized in front of everyone. As for Judge Judy, she moved on to the next case, as she always did. But that moment, the instant she revealed Karen's hidden past, became one of the clearest examples of why her courtroom was feared and respected at the same time. She didn't just settle disputes, she revealed character. And when someone tried to manipulate the truth, she exposed it for the world to see. That was the beauty and the ruthlessness of her court. And for Karen, it was a lesson that would follow her for the rest of her life. No matter how hard you try to hide from your past, the truth always has a way of stepping into the light, especially when Judge Judy is holding the flashlight. In the days that followed the televised episode, Karen's world began to unravel in ways she had never anticipated. The moment the episode aired, millions of viewers saw the confrontation that had unfolded in Judge Judy's courtroom. Within hours, social media platforms were flooded with clips, memes, and commentary. The internet had found its latest viral sensation, and her name was Karen. People who had never heard of her before were suddenly dissecting her expressions, replaying the instant she tried to deny her past, and sharing the exact second when Judge Judy revealed the mugshot to the world. Some laughed, others shook their heads in disbelief, and a few felt a tinge of pity for her. But the overwhelming reaction was one of fascination, the kind of fascination that comes from watching someone's carefully built facade crumble live on television. Karen had gone into that courtroom thinking she could control the narrative, that she could charm the judge, outsmart the plaintiff, and walk away with her reputation intact. Instead, she became a cautionary tale. Her confidence had turned into arrogance, her attempt at deception had turned into humiliation, and her secret, the mugshot she had fought so hard to bury, was now public record for all to see. For the first few days, she tried to ignore it. She avoided social media, refused to answer calls from friends, and convinced herself that the storm would blow over. But when she went to work, she realized it had already followed her there. Colleagues whispered behind her back, and even those who pretended to be polite couldn't hide their smirks. Someone had printed out a still frame from the episode and taped it to the office bulletin board. It was a cruel reminder that once something goes viral, it stops belonging to you. She confronted one of her coworkers, demanding to know who was responsible. But all she got in return was a quiet shrug and a sentence she would never forget: "Maybe if you hadn't lied on TV, people wouldn't be laughing." That stung more than anything Judge Judy had said. At home, Karen tried to escape the noise. She deleted her accounts, but her name still appeared in comment sections, video titles, and forums. Every time she thought it might die down, another meme surfaced, a screenshot of her shocked expression paired with captions like, "When Judge Judy finds your mugshot before you do." It wasn't just mockery. Some people used her as an example in discussions about honesty, accountability, and consequences. Teachers played the clip in media ethics classes, content creators analyzed her behavior frame by frame. She had become a symbol, not of crime, but of what happens when pride meets truth in front of a camera. Meanwhile, Judge Judy herself had moved on to hundreds of other cases, but that episode continued to circulate online. Interviewers asked her about it, and though she never mentioned Karen by name, her answer was always the same: "When you come into my courtroom, you come clean." Lies don't survive under bright lights. Karen, on the other hand, couldn't escape the feeling that those lights were still on her. One evening, as she scrolled through an article that detailed the top 10 most shocking Judge Judy moments, she found herself at number 3. Her photo, the very mugshot she had wanted to keep hidden, stared back at her. Her stomach sank. She closed the laptop and sat in silence. The reality had settled in. She couldn't undo what had been said or shown. The footage existed in 1,000 different uploads, preserved forever in the archives of the internet. Her lie wasn't just a moment of poor judgment anymore, it had become a permanent part of her digital identity. In quieter moments, she began to reflect on what had led her there. It wasn't just about the mugshot, it was about the decisions that came before it, the pride that had stopped her from admitting her mistakes, and the fear of being judged that ironically led to her greatest public humiliation. A few weeks later, Karen received a letter in the mail. It was from the production team of the show, a standard follow-up sent to participants. But instead of tossing it aside, she opened it. Inside was a brief summary of the case and a reminder of her payment, but at the bottom, there was a short handwritten note. It wasn't from a producer or assistant. It was from Judge Judy herself. The handwriting was unmistakable, neat, sharp, and confident. The note read, "People make mistakes. What matters is whether they learn from them. Don't hide from the truth. Face it, and you will never have to fear it again." Karen read the words over and over. For the first time since the episode aired, she felt something that wasn't shame. It was clarity. That single note didn't erase what had happened, but it gave her a chance to see it differently. Maybe, she thought, this was her chance to change, to stop running from her past and start rebuilding. Still, the road ahead wasn't easy. When she walked through public places, she could still feel the occasional stare. A stranger once recognized her in a grocery store and asked, "Hey, aren't you that woman from Judge Judy?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes," she said quietly. The stranger smiled awkwardly. "Rough day, huh?" Karen managed a faint laugh. "The roughest," she replied. And just like that, she realized something small but powerful. People might remember the moment, but they wouldn't define her by it unless she did. Months passed. The noise faded. The internet moved on, as it always does. But for Karen, the lesson stayed. Every time she was tempted to hide something, even something minor, she remembered that day, the cameras, the silence, and Judge Judy's voice saying, "You made the choice to lie. Actions have consequences." The irony wasn't lost on her. The mugshot she had tried so desperately to conceal had become the very thing that forced her to face herself. It stripped away her excuses, her pride, and her illusions. It showed her what honesty truly cost, and what dishonesty cost even more. Judge Judy's episode eventually became a timeless rerun. Every few months, it aired again on daytime TV, and new viewers would react to it like it was brand new. Some would post fresh comments online, others would message friends saying, "You have to see this one, the judge totally called her out." And though Karen hated knowing it was still out there, a small part of her accepted it. She had tried to erase the past, but perhaps it was meant to stay visible, as a reminder that truth, no matter how uncomfortable, is always more freeing than a lie. In a quiet moment, years later, she found herself watching that episode again, alone this time. She winced as she saw her old self on the screen, confident and defensive, still trying to talk her way out of the truth. But then she noticed something else. She could see the exact moment her old facade cracked, the second the truth hit her. And instead of anger or embarrassment, she felt gratitude. That version of her needed to fall apart so the real one could emerge. And though millions had watched her lowest moment, she finally understood what Judge Judy had meant all along. The truth doesn't humiliate you, it humbles you. And from humility comes strength. The show ended, the credits rolled, and Karen turned off the television. Outside, the sun was setting, bathing her living room in soft light. For the first time in a long while, she smiled. She couldn't change what the world had seen, but she could change what came next. Time has a strange way of dulling even the sharpest memories. What once felt like an unbearable spotlight eventually faded into the background hum of Karen's life. Months turned into years, and while the internet never truly forgets, people's attention shifted to new stories, new scandals, and new faces to mock. The storm that had once consumed her had finally passed. Karen's life didn't go back to how it was before, it changed completely. For the first time, she started taking responsibility, not just for that single mistake, but for a lifetime of pretending she had everything figured out. She learned to live more quietly, more honestly, and without the desperate need to control how others saw her. She found a small apartment on the edge of town, took a job where nobody recognized her, and kept mostly to herself. It wasn't glamorous, but it was peaceful. She spent her evenings reading, journaling, and occasionally watching old episodes of Judge Judy, not because she enjoyed reliving her humiliation, but because she had come to respect what the judge stood for. One night, as she flipped through channels, she caught an interview with Judge Judy on a talk show. The host asked her, "What's one case that really stuck with you after all these years?" Judge Judy smiled faintly. "You know, I don't like to single out cases," she said. "But I do remember one where a woman lied about never having been in trouble. She looked me in the eye and denied something that was right there in her record. What stood out wasn't the lie itself, it was her fear. She was terrified of being judged, and that fear made her do something foolish. People forget that honesty isn't just a virtue, it's freedom. Once you tell the truth, there's nothing left for anyone to use against you." Karen froze, listening to those words. She knew the story was about her, even if Judge Judy didn't mention her by name. But instead of shame, she felt a deep, quiet sense of peace. The judge hadn't spoken with cruelty, she had spoken with understanding. It was as though she had finally seen the human behind the mistake. In that moment, Karen realized something important: Judge Judy hadn't embarrassed her to punish her. She had done it to expose the truth, to show her, and everyone watching, what honesty really meant. It wasn't about humiliation, it was about clarity. And clarity was something Karen had never truly known until that day. Months later, she began volunteering at a local community center, helping people with housing disputes and small legal issues. She wasn't a lawyer, but she had learned a lot from her own experience. When people came in with stories about being treated unfairly, she listened carefully. And when someone tried to twist the truth, she could spot it immediately, not because she wanted to judge, but because she had once been in their shoes. Her co-workers noticed her calm, empathetic nature. "You're good with people," one of them said. "You make them feel safe enough to be honest." Karen smiled softly. "I learned from the best," she said. For the first time in years, she wasn't running from her past. She had turned it into something useful, something meaningful. The mugshot that once haunted her was still online, but now it was just a picture, a relic of who she used to be, not a reflection of who she had become. She even printed it out and kept it in a small box with the handwritten note Judge Judy had sent her. It wasn't self-punishment anymore, it was a reminder. A reminder of how far she had come, and of the price she had paid for pretending to be perfect. Meanwhile, the Judge Judy episode continued to circulate as one of the show's most unforgettable moments. Every few months, it would appear in online compilations titled things like "When Judge Judy Exposed a Lie on Live TV" or "The Mugshot That Shocked Millions." New viewers reacted with the same astonishment as those who had seen it the first time. Some laughed, others said it made them think twice about lying in court. It became more than entertainment, it became a lesson wrapped in drama. Judge Judy's words from that episode were quoted thousands of times across social media. "If you didn't want your mugshot to be seen, you shouldn't have created one." They were turned into memes, t-shirts, and reaction clips, but for those who looked deeper, it was a statement about truth and consequence. Years later, during another interview, a journalist asked Judge Judy, "Do you ever feel bad about how harshly you deal with some people?" The judge gave her signature smirk. "I don't feel bad for holding people accountable," she said. "If it feels harsh, it's probably because the truth hurts. But I never humiliate for the sake of humiliation. I do it because some people need a mirror held up to their behavior. My courtroom gives them that mirror." When Karen heard that quote, she smiled to herself. She knew exactly what the judge meant. That mirror had been painful, but it had shown her what she needed to see. Over time, Karen rebuilt her life piece by piece. She made amends with people she had wronged in the past, repaired old friendships, and even reached out to the plaintiff from the case. At first, the woman didn't respond. But one day, Karen received a brief message. "Apology accepted. I saw your interview. I'm glad you've changed." That message meant more to her than any apology she could ever receive. It was proof that the past didn't have to define her, it could simply remind her of where she'd been. Years down the line, Karen found herself standing in front of a group of young adults at a community seminar. The topic was accountability and integrity in everyday life. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Most of you probably don't recognize me," she began. "And I hope you never have to experience what I did. I once stood in front of millions of people and tried to lie my way out of the truth. I thought I was being smart. But I was really just scared." The room was silent. The truth is that being honest isn't easy. It can be uncomfortable, even painful. But once you tell it, it frees you. No one can use it against you. You stop hiding. And that's when your real life begins. When she finished, a few people applauded softly. One young woman raised her hand. "Was it hard, being on that show?" she asked. Karen smiled, a hint of bittersweet humor in her eyes. "Harder than you can imagine," she said. "But it was also the best thing that ever happened to me." After the seminar, she walked outside into the fading sunlight. The air was cool, and the streets were quiet. She felt lighter than she had in years. For the first time since her infamous courtroom appearance, she wasn't haunted by the memory, she was grateful for it. Because in the end, Judge Judy hadn't just exposed her, she had liberated her. The truth she had feared most had become the truth that saved her. And though millions of people had watched her at her lowest, she knew something they didn't. That moment wasn't her ending, it was her beginning. The cameras had captured her downfall, yes. But life, in its quiet, unseen moments afterward, had captured her redemption.